As we're slowly trickling in, may I ask the folks who are in the back, if you're standing, please grab a seat. There are plenty of seats in the front. It's a bit empty over here on the left side right here. So I hope that you had enough coffee, enough snacks to energize you. Our next panel will be on cloud computing, moderated by Avro Parkin. But before we get started, we have another polling question for you. So if you can, again, please take out your cell phones. Your polling question will come up on the screen. All right. How quickly do you expect to have majority of your market data infrastructure on cloud? 1 to 2 years, 3 to 4, 5 or more, or maybe never. You just want to keep your data all to yourself. Wow, 1 to 2 years. This is great. As the results are coming in, I'd like to welcome your next panel on cloud computing to the stage. Avra Parkin, your moderator, can you please join me on stage? And following her will be Dean Samuels, Head of Solution Architecture at AWS, Mickey Lowe, Chief Technology Officer, Risk Officer at BNY Mellon, John Go, Director of Security Engineering at Checkpoint, and Osman Ng, Customer Engineer at Google. So we have an extremely diverse crowd with you, or panel with you today. We do ask if you have any questions, submit them through Slido. Thank you again. Over to you, Avro.
Thank you, Angel. Welcome, everybody. This is the Cloud Panel. My name is Avril Parkin, and I'll just let the panel introduce themselves quickly.
Yes, good morning. My name is Dean Samuels. I lead the solutions architecture team for Amazon Web Services, Hong Kong and Taiwan, and I'm based here in Hong Kong.
Good morning, Mickey Lowe. I look after information risk for BNY Mellon based in Hong Kong, addressing other countries in Asia Pacific, including India. This is a challenge.
Hi, my name is John. I am the Director of Security Engineering for Checkpoint Software Technologies. I look after the entire region, like North Asia, so that consists of China, Korea, Taiwan, and here in Hong Kong, and I based out of Hong Kong.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Osman Ng. I'm the customer engineer lead in Hong Kong, in Google Cloud. Thank you very much. I'm based in Hong Kong, too.
Thank you, guys. So I guess we should address the polling question before we start. So maybe I'll go to Mickey. If you can let me know how you feel about the question that we have here is how much of your market data infrastructure will be on the cloud. So how is BNY Mellon doing on this?
I thought we're there, actually. We've been using various market data provider, and they are running on cloud already. And within BNY, it's too early in the morning, I need my coffee. Within BNY Mellon, we don't actually run our own infrastructure, we just consume the market data from different providers. So to me, my answer to this question is within a year. I would expect most of the banks would do that. In fact, a majority of trading environment that I'm aware of have been using different software services out there, and they're all running on cloud, whether it's for instruments or trading, matching, and so forth. So I think we are there, actually, almost.
Great to hear. So Thomson Reuters, we have our own cloud strategy. We have on the cloud, in the cloud, and we are the cloud. And when it comes to delivering data, we want to be able to provide trusted, real-time data no matter where our customers are. But the appetite for cloud adoption in Asia has been slow. So despite the fact that financial institutions across Asia are under pressure to improve efficiency and embrace digital transformation. But the process has been slow, and the regulations that apply differ from one jurisdiction to the next. Can we expect to see an increase in cloud consumption by financial organizations going forward? And I'd like to put that question to our cloud providers. So maybe Dean, from AWS, you'd like to go first?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So at AWS, we believe in the fullness of time, most organizations will be all in on the cloud, whether it's whichever provider. We see that cloud computing services will be delivered in the same way as electricity, gas, water, and so on, a utility, essentially. So technology doesn't really stifle organizations when they want to innovate and try out new ideas. Now, specifically in the financial services sector, we are already seeing a lot of financial services organizations starting to deploy material workloads in the cloud, whether it's someone like Suncorp Metway who have gone all in into cloud. So a large majority of their digital properties are running on cloud-based platforms, whether it's Commonwealth Bank, the largest bank in Australia, who are looking at migrating again a lot of their core banking environments into AWS. When you look at areas like fintech as well, allowing a lot of new players in the market to really disrupt the industry. So a customer of ours like Robinhood, which basically offers a mobile share trading platform, a fee-free share trading platform, really disrupting the way that the securities and market works by leveraging cloud-based services. So yeah, once again, what we do see is in the fullness of time, most organisations will be all in on the cloud.
Osmond, do you want to comment on this?
I do agree with Dean about the trend. And from Google, actually, we also see the trend is a lot of companies adopting cloud, especially FSI, because bank has a lot of data, and they want to create a very unique, personal touch to their customer. So with all that kind of information, you have to get almost near real time, a very ad hoc query, all these kind of things, which require a lot of computational power, a lot of big data analytic capabilities, and all these kind of machine learning things will be chipping in. So with on-prem, may or may not be able to do that, but with cloud, definitely you can adopt this kind of technology very easily. So we did see the trend is FSI is moving, even though the regulation is coming in. So all this kind of thing is moving. Okay.
So you hit the nail on the head in terms of regulation. So the regulators require minimum that FSI companies provide a risk assessment and due diligence on the cloud service providers' capability, and the companies retain accountability for the services. So how do service providers help their customers ensure that they are acting in the best interest?
For that part, actually, there's a lot of regulation, or like in previous panel, we talk about GDPR, all these kind of things. And there are some rules and guidelines and discussion about how we handle data and also partition the data, how we relocate the data or data movement kind of things. Actually, on Google side, actually, we not only providing cloud infrastructure, we also provide G Suite, which is an office-related collaboration tools. All this kind of information, we definitely help our customer to compliance of this regulation. And we are also working very hard with all the ISO standard. But this kind of things is we share the responsibility, because we cannot do all the things by ourselves. We say that we can do everything. But we do share the responsibility to help our customer to comply to that regulations and support that kind of operation with ease.
If I may add on to that, despite there are increasing regulations in terms of governing financial institutions on controls, but I'm seeing in the recent 3 to 4 years, even Hong Kong MA has relaxed to a certain extent use of cloud, same as in Singapore as well. They really encourage the use of cloud. Of course, it has to be in controlled environment. And now with the recent initiatives in Hong Kong on the Open API, there's more and more push in the use of cloud, and also considering the fintech evolution. Actually, cloud is inevitable. It's always there. But there are many other industry forums trying to get together and hopefully can influence cloud providers in terms of what security measures and what standard that we can adopt, so that it will be easier for FI to adopt the cloud journey and make it easier for us to go to regulators and present our solutions in that matter.
Yeah, just to add to that, Mickey and Osman, absolutely right. If you have a look at a lot of the regulators that we do work with, they are very open to working with us and having material workloads deployed onto cloud providers. HKMA is a really good example where, in principle, they are totally fine, not only with having banking organisations deploy various applications into cloud, but also even offshore as well, as long as the right security controls and precautions are put in place. And the shared responsibility model that Osman spoke about is really important. The cloud isn't this magical place that has everything secure and reliable and performant and everything else. Organisations and customers do need to take responsibility of making sure that they leverage the right security controls, follow the right compliance practices, whether it's technology provided by the cloud provider or the partners that support the cloud, and applying them to the various workloads that they have. And even the regulators themselves are actually leveraging cloud. So FINRA is actually a really good example. Regulatory body in the US for securities and options trading. Well, they use AWS to actually replay all the security and options trading from that previous day in the US market to identify any suspected fraud, insider trading, and so on. So even the regulators themselves are adopting cloud-based technologies.
Great, thank you. So in Australia, Hong Kong, and Singapore, the financial regulators require rights of access and the ability to audit. So are there standards in place for this?
Absolutely. So first and foremost, when customers use AWS, they continue to own their data. They continue to control how that data is accessed from a logical access control. They control how it's actually stored, whether it's how it's durably stored, reliably stored, and securely stored, so using encryption and so on. Osman mentioned before about some of the certifications and accreditations around SOC 1, SOC 2, ISO, even industry standard certifications, so PCI, DSS certifications. So these are standard certifications that apply to all of the cloud-based infrastructure that we actually run. And those controls do indicate that regulators, for example, need access or can get access with the customer's approval, of course, to the various content that is being stored in the cloud. And the beauty behind cloud-based services, regardless of the vendor, is that the organisation or the customer is not locked in. They can easily take that data away, remove it from the cloud, and transfer it somewhere else. Okay, great. So if we've got our heads around regulation, the next big topic in terms of cloud adoption is security. So, the cloud providers have matured their security offerings and they've obtained regulatory certifications. But what additional measures can be taken by organizations in terms of cybersecurity? So, John, would you like to answer that for us?
Yeah. I guess first... Hello. Okay. So, because there are a couple of things in terms of protecting our customers in the data, but I want to first touch base on a couple of things that we talked about earlier, is that when we talk to our customers around the region, the first question that comes up is that, are my data safe? Like, how are you protecting my data, making sure my data is not going to be, being seen by other tenants? That's the first thing that comes up, and I think we answer that question by putting in encryption in place that, your data is going to be safe in the cloud. And then the other question that comes up is the responsibility of security. And I think, Dean touched on a little bit earlier is that when moving to the cloud, the responsibility must be clear between yourselves and also the cloud provider, right? So underlying platform is actually being protected by the security of the cloud, protected by the cloud vendor, and then the security in the cloud is actually responsibility of the customers. Now, when we talk to our customers, there's, the common theme is surrounding about three things, right? First and foremost is about, the different priorities and how do you move to the cloud. So, first is that we recommend our customers to first understand the business, must align the security strategy to the business. Make sure that it's actually, we are all moving in the same direction, right? So it's not that, a lot of times, when we talk to techies, right, they go on a tantrum and going off somewhere, which is totally not aligned to the business. So our first recommendation is we must understand the business, align our security strategy to the business. Second is I need coffee. The second point is having that framework. We must understand moving to the cloud. You must have those framework. Simple things like your security policy. even best practices of moving to the cloud, and this will get you away from a lot of trouble that you may run into in the cloud. It is essentially putting in the rails on the road. Make sure that any future cloud projects that you won't go off the rail and fall off the cliff. So make sure that you have a nice framework in place protecting you when you're moving to the cloud, that you're following the right processes. And lastly, my recommendation is that in terms of selecting a security partner, these partners must have a strong presence in the cloud, like things like tools. A little bit more technical now is having the API, because going to the cloud is all about automation, and security a lot of times is very, very slow. And I'm sure many of you here, when you try to implement an application in your organization, it will take you up to 3 to 6 months. So, and this is because there is no API, there's no automation in place, and this is what is slowing you down. So when you select a security partner, make sure that they have this automation, they have a strong presence in place, with that API in place to help you speed up the deployment process of your application.
Thanks, John. Mickey, has BNY Mellon had any dealings with security, and how do you approach security at your company?
Yes, of course. I presume the regulators are here as well. Just kidding. I fully agree with what John said. One thing we need to be cognizant with the fact that even though we use cloud providers, we outsource our infrastructure computing power to cloud providers. We do not outsource any responsibility on security. So still light with the bank in terms of security, the ultimate accountability of that. So we address the things that John mentioned in terms of things in the cloud. How do we ensure we can continue with all the access control to our users and our clients, and things on the cloud, what providers will provide in terms of securing infrastructure. Before we choose or select any specific cloud providers, we look at all the SOC reports that Dean mentioned earlier, the SOC 1, SOC 2, and so forth. The interesting thing is, to what extent can we examine or audit the security provisions of cloud providers? By and large, if cloud providers adopt certain industry standard, it will be a lot easier for us without doing a specific on-site visit. But otherwise, it will be really a challenge to do that, and despite considering the fact that the data centers of the cloud providers may be somewhere in other regions as well. So there are a lot of discussions back and forth. But the key challenge, I think, so far in terms of security, not so much in terms of control measures. I think most of cloud providers have very robust and sound measures with the use of different crypto technology. The challenge is really on legal contract discussion, the terms and conditions. How do we define security incidents? How we define BNY Mellon may not be what AWS define, and so forth. And how do we satisfy our regulatory reporting time frame? In Singapore, we have to report to MAS within 1 hour if there's a major incident affecting our critical applications. So that 1 hour time frame, that means our cloud provider, if we do use the provider to process our critical applications, has to notify us within perhaps a few minutes. Now, how do we define the criticality will be a major challenge. And how do we specify it in the T's and C's in the contract, another challenge. And how do we define incident will be another challenge. So I'm not saying that providers are not cooperating, but then they have many other clients as well. So each client may have a different definitions, and the poor providers will not be able to meet all those requirements of all the clients. So here is where we expect industry standard will come to the picture. Let's have a universal definitions of incidents, and hopefully the regulators will come to agreement in terms of reporting timeline as well. We're seeing that being discussed, but it will be another hurdle to have to overcome.
Okay, great. Dean, Osman, did you want to comment on security?
Yes, actually, going back to what John said about APIs, I don't want to get technical either, but you could actually argue that when organizations do move to cloud-based platforms, they have a lot more visibility in terms of what is actually happening in their environment. Because everything is programmatic, it's removing the human from the actual process of managing the infrastructure. Everything can get a lot can be a lot more easily tracked and is visible. And then going back to what Mickey said in terms of reporting and things like threat detection, it is a lot easier because of this programmatic workflow. And if you have a look at what, for example, Amazon is doing, so not AWS, but Amazon.com retail, in terms of how we operate at petabyte scale. We can't have human beings actually doing our threat detection. And so there's a lot of automation, there's a lot of machine learning, there's a lot of artificial intelligence involved in the actual process that's actually making these decisions. So the response time and the reaction time is actually a lot quicker as well. So the API is important because it does provide that visibility.
Okay, great. John, coming back to you, is there any evidence to suggest, whether the threat of cybersecurity goes up if you move your services to the cloud?
Yeah, absolutely. So just over the past year in 2017, so there's a lot of news. I won't name the specific names, but there's a lot of companies that make headlines because they have leaked customer data, and this is mainly contributed to the again, going back to what I said earlier, having that framework in place, right? A lot of these attacks could have been prevented by simply following that, the security policy, following some of the best practices. Things like, default username passwords, things like exposing your entire data share onto the internet, right? Anybody can actually get access to it. So these are kind of some of the things that companies is not doing to protecting themselves. That's one thing, right? It's back to the basics. And in terms of basics, a few things, right? Going to the cloud is, a lot of companies are thinking, going to the cloud is this thing, someone else's computer, and I don't have to take care of the security basics like, network segmentation and having the security access controls in place that between the different security levels of servers. Those things are, totally forgot about it, right? So totally forgot about the very basics. And also going a little bit about the what are some of the things that you can do, right? So and how do some of the things that you can further enhance your security posture in the cloud are applying things like layer 4 to layer 7, right? So some of the security technologies like IPS that will prevent you from attackers from hacking into your different services that you have exposed to the internet, right? IPS. Talking about data, like DLP, data leak prevention. So this is technology that will prevent people from extracting your critical information out to the internet, right? And then further into it, we talk about more advanced stuff, such as the zero-day protection. Ransomware was very, very big in 2017. There's actually entire industry talking about ransomware, and there was a power company in the U.S. that actually got locked down by ransomware in the cloud. So customers can actually start utilizing technologies that are available even in the cloud that to prevent zero-day attacks, such as preventing from ransomware. And then the forensics capabilities, right? You can also apply into the cloud as well, where giving you the ability to extract like IOCs. So once you have those IOCs, then you can start distributing to the rest of your environment to protect against these type of attacks. So yes, to answer your question, definitely, the customer data is, where the customer is going after, where the hackers are going after, definitely increases the chances you, being a target, and especially in the FSI industry where, where the money is. So people are coming after, after that. Yep.
But for that, I want to chip in one thing is, because Google is being very vulnerable for hackers to visit, right? So we actually create a whole new infrastructure of security. So actually we did create a chipset, but this is just for USB. The chips is just like a rice, which we call Titan. Actually we certify all the hardware and network device, all the traffic from within the infrastructure. And this one is for myself. Actually I have certified myself before I generate any traffic to the infrastructure. And this kind of thing, actually we can have another layer of security is we call it identity-aware proxy, because when we share the infrastructure, share the network, all the firewall rules, all this thing is not application-aware. It's just device or network machine-aware. So this kind of mechanism actually help us to add another layer of security and control. Just
one other thing to add around security. One of the benefits of a a cloud service provider is that any customer, regardless of size, organisation or industry, really benefits from what the cloud provider is doing in the security space. So, for example, us working with whether it's Capital One in the US or whether it's DBS in Singapore that has certain requirements and needs certain controls in place, that new fintech or that new startup that starts to leverage the same cloud service provider can immediately get access to a lot of the services and technology that those large-scale organisations can use as well. So this is typically unheard of when organisations had to run their own infrastructure. So cloud service providers, whether it's Google, AWS or Microsoft, are really innovating on behalf of the customer, but that innovation then applies to the entire customer base.
Okay, great. So we've got our heads around regulation and we've got some security measures in place now. So, cloud solutions have evolved significantly. They're no longer places to store virtual machines and to process data. The analytics and the tools that are now available are accelerating development. So what are the trends that you're seeing? If we can go to Dean first.
Yep, sure. So from an AWS perspective, the three key areas I think that we're seeing a large amount of interest and traction, not only in financial services but across industry, is around artificial intelligence, around IoT and around analytics. Artificial intelligence, the prediction from IDC is from next year, so around 80% of large-scale projects are actually going to involve some type of artificial intelligence. Now, I don't mean Skynet from Terminator or Jarvis from Iron Man in terms of artificial intelligence. That's strong AI. I'm talking about weak AI. Weak AI is essentially where simple decisions that are normally done by a human being is going to be done by technology. And so building this capability into various applications and projects is really going to allow a lot of innovation in that space. So we're already seeing it, for example, with some of our customers who are doing fraud detection in large amounts of data, so in petabyte types of data, using artificial intelligence, or more specifically machine learning or deep learning, to actually make the decisions and identify patterns and also make predictions of when suspected fraud could eventually occur. If you look at the IoT space, so by 2020 there will be about 50 billion different devices, all interconnected, reporting information. I'm sure everybody in this room right now is probably wearing something that is reporting information, whether it's a Fitbit, there you go, or a smartwatch, as well as your mobile phone. You'll have your clothing in the future that will be taking some type of information and reporting it to a provider. So the barrier of entry into the IoT space is significantly reduced. So we're working with some insurance companies, for example, who are taking information from their members and tracking their activity. And based on the activity, are they going to the movies rather than going to the gym? Are they eating at McDonald's rather than eating a nice salad? And based on that information, customizing policies, offering discounts, offering promotions, and so on. And then finally, in the analytics space, if I had to do my career all over again, I'll definitely get into the data analytics space, the data science space. As we start to accumulate more and more data and starting to discover more types of insights we can actually get from that data, and technology not being the inhibitor to allow us to do that, we are in for a bright future.
Great, thank you. So Osmond, what cloud tools are disrupting banking from your perspective?
I think the answer is very similar to what Dean has mentioned, is based on analytic and also machine learning, all this kind of thing. Because for banking, as I mentioned before, banking is going forward with a very high touch and personalized experience. With that, then you most probably have to harvest insight from banking data, marketing data, and all the environment information. So with that, actually, there is a very high demand on high volume data processing, a very highly efficient big data processing, and also analytic capabilities. And also is how you can identify patterns from using machine learning and create actionable items for the banks to take action. For example, the fraud detection, the risk level assessment, what's the customer segmentation, all this kind of thing, and also the predictive lifetime value, all this kind of calculation. is is based on data analytic and also machine learning things.
Great, thank you. So would you say that these examples would have been difficult to run in a traditional environment?
With all this kind of thing is based on calculation. Definitely can run on-prem, but there will be a limitation there because you cannot purchase unlimited number of machine. For Google, actually we deploy machine in every 3 seconds. So 1/3 of Intel CPU is go to Google directly. So this is the economy scale, and we help to manage all this infrastructure. We actually create a special processing unit called TensorFlow Processor Unit, which is 16 or 30 times better than GPU. When you think about calculation, big data processing, it provides the speed. You definitely run on, actually we open source the TensorFlow engine. You definitely can run it on-prem, but you may not be able to reach the scale that we are offering. And also how you manage the infrastructure. Bank is not actually is not an IT firm. You want to offer service to a customer. We are the IT firm that help you to organize and operate those kind of things, right? So you don't want to employ thousands of people, thousands of scientists to operate all these nitty-gritty things by yourself, right? So this is the way that why we see the trend. A lot of companies going to the cloud, and Dean already mentioned we're expecting in certain years back, actually all customers are all in with the cloud.
If I may add a comment from a bank side, I agree with all that actually. What all the 3 gentlemen have mentioned in terms of securities, in terms of solutions, in terms of approach, I think most banks are doing that in-house. And that's where we started. Actually, I think cloud adoption is a journey. We started with a private cloud, things in-house with virtualization. So to maximize the use of CPU power and storage in that sense, in avoiding idle time on those hardware infrastructure. But agree totally with what Osman said. Over time, it is not our intent to manage such expensive IT infrastructure becomes a fixed asset. We want to be very, very dynamic and pay on demand, just like utilities. So having our infrastructure applications to be private cloud enabled make it easier for us to move into a hybrid and combinations of private and public, and then eventually into public cloud offers. So that's what we're doing right now. We're doing a lot in terms of analytic, whether it is AML related or KYC related or even trading related and so forth. Can that be moved into cloud? Absolutely, over time. In fact, when we look at the fintech and regtech space, there are so many KYC fintech vendor and there's so many AML fintech vendor. And behind the scene, they all operate on the cloud. So when banks adopt AML and KYC service providers, we're adopting anyway cloud behind the scene without noticing that. So that's one aspect. And to Dean's earlier point, I think cloud vendors are spending a lot. I'm not joining cloud vendors anymore. I want to make a disclaimer. Are spending a lot of investment in improving security measures, especially for the SME. I think is a benefit to consider cloud because those SMEs will not be able to spend equal amount of investment on security. End up, they will be a target for attacks in future. Now, while cloud providers are definitely a target of attacks because of the concentrations of all the data, but I presume they will be spending equal amount of investment to secure the perimeter, to safeguard the data. So it is really an oxymoron. On the one hand, we think cloud providers are not secure. On the other hand, we believe they are spending a lot to secure that in order to protect their own brand. So I think what is important is really for us to understand, as John said earlier, what is really a business strategy that can be enabled using virtualization eventually will be a candidate for cloud adoption over time.
Just on a personal note, I moved to Hong Kong about 5 years ago. And it took me an hour and a half to open a bank account here in Hong Kong. So I hope that,
Which bank you use?
And I had to go back to the branch like 5 times to sign different forms. So I hope that that soon that we'll be able to move much faster. Cut down an hour and a half to maybe half hour. I'm very happy. So this is from a user perspective, from a consumer perspective, right, of the banking services here. So.
You're stealing my question, John. I was going to say, with new frameworks like Open Banking API and the virtual banking consultation paper that's come out, what opportunities can this bring? And are we going to see the emergence of new solutions? And how will this affect the legacy and incumbent services?
Yeah, so if we look at the definition of open banking, it's really broken down into three main components. There's open APIs, open data, and open source. And open or APIs in general, I think, is really the core element of it, in that once an organisation realises the way they can innovate when they can open their environment up to others, to partners, to actually build an ecosystem around their service, it really allows them to innovate, maybe even disrupt the industry they're operating in, and really change quickly based on customer experience or customer feedback. Being able to make those rapid changes to your platform while still providing the service through the API itself really allows you a lot of freedom. And so we're seeing a lot of banking organisations already do that. I've been involved personally with a few organisations like Citibank, for example, who run hackathons around open APIs, so where they provide certain services through these APIs and invite partners and third-party providers to come in and build various applications, like mobile applications, that interact with their API. Capital One is a really good example. So one of the larger retail banks in the US. So they've built around their retail banking API natural language processing applications. So the ability for their customers to actually interact with the banking platform through voice. So you're sitting at home and you want to find out what the balance of your account is, or if you want to transfer money across, rather than having to pull out your mobile phone, you can actually just interact it through voice and through a voice conversation. So we're going to see both the traditional or the incumbent players start to innovate in how they offer their services and change the customer experience. But then we're also going to see a lot of new players in the market that are really going to disrupt the finance industry.
Osman, did you want to comment?
With the Hong Kong MA Banking Open API consultation paper, actually it already mentioned that the bank can adopt third-party service provider. So there may be some kind of hints about actually the bank can leverage other service provider like the cloud service provider, but they talk about they want to consolidate and confirm what kind of security measure or the regulation is being placed for that. So, but there is a time frame in the paper. Actually, is within 6 to a year, the bank has to open certain API to the public. So this kind of speed actually is talk about how you adopt and create agility within the bank.
Okay, great. So hopefully you won't have to wait too long, John, before a better user experience from some of the banking organizations in Hong Kong. Okay, so before we open up for questions, I'm just going to go through the panel and ask you one by one to give a piece of advice to our lovely audience members regarding cloud adoption. So can I go first with you, Osman?
Advice?
They didn't know about this, so this is off the fly.
I think my advice is be open, because I work in bank quite a while ago, and people try to think about cloud is not an option because of the regulation, but they didn't do a good job in classifying the data. But if we really do the decent data classification or security measure or the policy, actually there is certain data. Definitely there is certain data can be put on cloud, and by enormous calculation, tokenization, all these kind of things. And then the bank actually can benefit from using cloud technology to give you the agility and the elasticity of providing service. So with that, then you can enjoy what is offering on the cloud. Is the infrastructure as a service, the machine learning things, the natural language processing, or the speech API, image API, all these kind of pre-trained machine learning model, then you can actually open a very rich function and features or the value to your customer. So try be open and talk to your peers, talk to the cloud provider, or talk to the others. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Great. Advice. So for me, from a security vendor perspective, is that when our customers are moving to the cloud, when our customers actually implement any type of security, my piece of advice is that treat your security vendor, treat them as your security partner instead of just a vendor, right? So because as a vendor, we have exposure to a lot of different industries, also within the FSI industry, very strong, references. So what we can bring to the table is give you references, or what your other peers are doing, or how they solve these problems, right? Invite us to come in and talk to you, and actually throw some of the hard challenges to us, right? And we're happy to work with you to help you migrate to the cloud. So that's my piece of advice.
As I said before, I think the cloud adoption is a journey. We should all have been started a few years back, if not yet. Again, my message is I think the regulators, not just in Hong Kong, but in general, regulators in APAC regions, they are opening up to the adoption of cloud by FIs. So don't be afraid to touch base with your regulators and have a discussion and have a dialogue. Maintain the transparency with the regulators will certainly give you a level of comfort of how do you embark on that journey. But most important is to put the business requirement first. If I recall when I first came up to work many years ago, don't ask me how many years, I used this thing from IBM called CMS, virtual machine. This is actually, I think, is a first form of virtualization by sharing computer power, by segmenting, slicing the CPU. So right now, vendors are actually structuring that into a cloud offer. So all of us have been using the technology for the past decades anyway. So don't be afraid. Move forward with that.
Yeah, and just to add actually onto that, Mickey brought up a good point about being a journey. It is actually a marathon, not a sprint, to move to the cloud. So whilst I say that as far as AWS is concerned, we believe in the fullness of time that most organisations will be all in the cloud. It is going to be a long journey to that space. Identifying certain workloads, applications that are really related to your business outcomes. A great point that Mickey brought up. Have it be a business-driven decision, not be distracted with all these shiny objects or AI or machine learning. I want to get into that space, but really a business need, a business challenge, a business use case, and then applying that in some type of cloud-based technology, your learnings from that, and then iterate and apply that to further projects, and then slowly look at potentially that migration into a cloud provider. At AWS, our focus is to really remove what we call the undifferentiated heavy lifting from you, meaning that as an organisation, you can really focus on innovating for your customers that is really adding value to the business. Keeping machines on, making sure they're highly reliable is not adding value to your business. If you have a look at what is the most common driver for our customers to move to cloud-based platforms, it's not actually cost, although that is a benefit in terms of cost reduction in most cases. It's actually the time to market, agility, the ability to deliver an idea very quickly, experiment with it, and if it does fail, either iterate or pivot or just discard and move on. So you're eliminating the barrier to entry, you're reducing the cost of failure by leveraging cloud-based services as the technology platform to try out those ideas.
Great, thank you. So you've heard it. Be open, treat your vendors as partners. Don't be afraid of the regulators, and get started with your marathon. So now I'd like to open it up for questions.
Hi, David Chung from PwC. A couple of weeks ago, iCloud was sold to a local mainland operator in China. Okay, is that the future of doing business in China? Okay, that's my first question. And my second question is, if I had a cloud outside of China and a cloud inside of China, how does the two clouds link together from a corporate perspective?
So I can probably answer the second question.
The first question? How about? The first question is about selling the infrastructure, right? Which incident are you talking about?
I think we'll get some clarity on the first question.
Okay, so as you know, iCloud belongs to Apple, okay? And Apple was told that they cannot provide their iCloud services in mainland China a couple of weeks ago. They could only provide iCloud services as long as a mainland firm, an SOE, managed the iCloud. So Apple sent an email, well, not an email, a message to everyone on iCloud saying that they had to delete sensitive data, which could, affect them, right? Because iCloud will no longer be will no longer be managed by them, by Apple. So if I'm a corporation trying to do business in China, okay, and I'm in cloud-based, my own cloud, is this the future of doing business where, the mainland China government is controlling my cloud?
So I don't think we can speak for Apple, but maybe Osman and Dean can share your interactions with China and how organizations can do business.
Yep, sure. And actually might relate to what you spoke about regarding Apple. I can't talk specifically on Apple's decision. Obviously, I don't work for Apple, but the way that we do operate our regions, our infrastructure in China. So AWS does have 2 regions in China, and region is simply a set of data centers, a cluster of data centers that provides our services. There is a regulation, a requirement within China that the actual operations, the day-to-day operations of those data centers needs to be owned by a Chinese entity, essentially an organization that's not only based in China, but is a Chinese organization. So we actually do partner with CNET for our Beijing region and Western Cloud for our new Ningxia region. In that those 2 partners do the day-to-day operations and management of the data centers, but all of our IP, all of our technology, all of our services are still wholly owned by AWS. A lot of the accreditations and certifications I spoke about still apply to the Beijing and Ningxia regions, which we operate in. And in addition to that, we still maintain the stance that the customer owns their content that they're deploying into China, and they have control over how they're going to control the access to that content as well, leveraging the same logical access control methods. If they choose to use encryption, for example, as well, it really is up to the customer to do that. But in terms of how we operate in China, we do work with local business entities, and that would be the same for other cloud providers that would want to set up business in China as well.
Yeah. I do agree with what Dean has mentioned. This is the policy within China to operate cloud services. So whatever cloud services offered within China is owned by a Chinese entity, or majority of share is owned by a Chinese entity. So with that, actually, what you have concern about the data is you have to think about what kind of measure you can safeguard for example, encrypt your data, and also how you can using other cryptography mechanism to protect your data from other access. So which means that you own your data. And then you can make your data movement across the region. But certainly there are some rules within China is, for example, the financial transaction data, personal identification data cannot leave China. So this is the thing that you have to aware on but you definitely have to talk to your counterpart with legal advice, all these kind of things. As a cloud provider, we can only advise on technology side is what kind of capabilities or function features that we actually offer help you to safeguard your data, and also provide a mechanism help you to move data across region, across continents, all this kind of thing. But for how you operate things, it's not our part to do advice here.
And just on that second question you had about having multi-region deployments or deployments inside of China and outside of China. So we do have a lot of customers that actually have that type of setup. So where they've deployed a certain application or service where the facilities in China are used as well as outside of China. So from a technical perspective, there's no inhibitor to do that. It is possible to set up that connectivity and access from your user base outside of China, accessing in China. There is an additional set of steps that you need to go through, though, working with the Chinese government and regulations. We can help you with that. So, for example, if you wanted to deploy into China your application but make it accessible outside of China, there's an ICP recordal that you have to apply for. So CNET and Western Digital, which I mentioned as partners of ours before, along with us, can actually help you achieve that. So there are going to be additional steps if you want to set up in China, but it is possible to have that multi-region deployment. We do have a lot of customers that actually do that.
And added to that, actually a lot of customers will establish a multi-cloud strategy because you can use open technology because there's a lot of cloud vendor within China offering cloud services. You can use open technology like Kubernetes, container technologies. Then you can deploy your own infrastructure, a set of infrastructure within China, and then using networking technology interconnect to the outside China infrastructure, but maintain the consistency of your application and overall operation model.
If I may add, I think the issue here is not just China. In general, is where the data is. So in view of the GDPR questions earlier in the previous panel, in certain countries' jurisdiction, we're required to know where the data is. So in many contracts that we enter with the cloud providers, we actually specified which regions that we can consume the data center services. And most cloud providers are allowed to can support that as well. So it's not really a cloud provider issue. It's more in terms of for us to understand our business model, regulations of the countries, and what the data will we going to offshore or transfer to cloud providers and make decisions out there. So I think technology definitely is enabled.
Yeah, and that's actually a really good point. Going back to what I mentioned about the customer always controls and owns their data. Our region concept, if you have a look at the 18 regions that we have around the globe, including the 2 in China, each region is actually within a single country border. So whether it's in Singapore or Sydney or soon to be Hong Kong at the end for 2018, the facilities are in a single country. And so once a customer uses that region, AWS will actually never transfer that content outside of that region. Now, we'll provide you the tools to do so, but it's your responsibility if you choose to actually do so. So that applies to all of the regions that we have around the globe. It never actually leaves the country border.
Great, thank you. Any more questions from the audience?
Hello. Hi. This is Kevin Leung from BOA Financial Group. Just wonder if the panel have any recommendations to have one cloud service provider or multiple service provider, because I think this is a pretty tricky question from the bank or from the customer perspective. Because I think when you adopt one cloud provider, probably you can leverage all the technologies that they provide, but at the same time there will be sort of like a risk of being one vendor. So any suggestions and recommendations?
Mickey, should we ask you to answer that first, and then we can...
I'm sure Dean will say yes, one only. And so does Osman. Let me share, well, I don't think I can give you a recommendation, but in BNY Mellon, we use multiple providers on different usage. Again, going back to your point, we're also concerned in terms of concentration of risk. And regulators always ask the questions, what is the resiliency and resolution requirement? What if this specific cloud provider ceases to exist? What do we do, and so forth? So we're not going to put all eggs in one basket. That's my recommendation. But then the challenge is now you have multiple providers. How do we integrate the information? So it comes back to the fundamental question is the adoption of cloud has to be business driven. If we can segmentize a business environment then maybe you can choose one provider for one business environment and so forth.
Yeah, and it does come down to a business-driven decision, but it also depends on what you define as cloud. Are you talking about software as a service? Are you talking about infrastructure as a service, platform as a service? In our experience, when customers try to go down the route of having multi-cloud infrastructure as a service providers, typically what they need to do is then work with the lowest common denominator, meaning that it does stifle their ability to innovate because they need to ensure if they're doing multi-cloud that they're using services and features that are available across all of those multiple cloud vendors. And we found that the experience from customers hasn't been so great in that respect. And also even trying to put in that abstraction layer, that single pane of glass to actually manage across different multiple cloud environments. Now, if you're looking at having a cloud provider around your infrastructure, different cloud providers around SaaS, different cloud providers around platform, then absolutely we do have customers that look at having that type of deployment to, number one, yes, maybe eliminate a risk, although that could be argued, but number two, it's basically the best solution for their particular business case. Maybe a particular platform doing analytics is a lot better than a platform which accelerates more on the infrastructure side.
Thank you. And we're out of time, so apologies to the Slido question person. Please try and find us afterwards and we can try and answer your question. Thank you, everyone, and thank you to my panelists.